Okay, just letting in a few more people, but good evening, everybody. We are starting with our week 8 presentation. We're going to be speaking about the paperwork financial statements. We have with us today Jennifer and Lynn. She is a lawyer who will be speaking about our financial statements. So just a quick reminder of our territorial acknowledgements. About AC. You guys have all probably read this already, but just a reminder about AC is a nonprofit organization. We began in 2011 and we host legal workshops and we often help people fill out their forms. And again, our acknowledgements of the people that helped us bring this course together. We definitely could not have done this without all of these people here, as well as all of our volunteers to speak about the topics that we're discussing. Again, we're going to go over a little briefly about the difference between legal advice and legal information. The AC Family Law School does not provide legal advice to participants. Everything that we are going to give is legal information. So any questions specific to cases, we are not able to answer. So just keep that in mind if you're going to be submitting any kind of questions. We are recording our session tonight, so make sure you keep your video off and keep your either for your first name or just your initials. If you have any questions, don't forget to email us, info@litigantschoolbc.com. Okay, so today, like I said, we have Jennifer Lynn speaking today. She is a lawyer, family lawyer, and she has represented clients in all areas of family law. She has done as provincial, supreme, and a court of appeal, and she is skilled in both litigation and alternative dispute resolution processes. Okay, today we're going to be going over the Form F8 financial statement document. This is a Supreme Court form. And then once Jennifer has finished going through the form, we will have a brief question and answer session. So I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer to speak now.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Hi, everyone. Thanks for attending tonight. My name is Jennifer. I'm going to be talking to all of you today about how to fill out financial statements. Can you move the slide one over, Rachel? To the next one. Yeah, thanks. And so financial statements, this talk is going to get probably pretty technical because it is a bit of a technical document, so you are going to have to bear with me on this. But it is also a very important document. And like most things in life, things that are important require effort. So let's just dive in. So first question, what is a financial statement? Or also known as a Form 8 or Form F8 financial statement, or just Form F8. You may have heard variations on all of these terms. They all mean the same thing, and they all refer to the same document. It is, as Rachel mentioned, a form that is used in the BC Supreme Court. And as I've mentioned, it's one of the most important documents in a family law case. It is essentially an affidavit that has to be sworn with a lawyer or notary. It just doesn't look like a typical affidavit format that you may have seen before. A financial statement is essentially contains a summary of your income, expenses, assets, and debts. In other words, it is a budget that you fill out with those pieces of information. If your case is in the BC Supreme Court, you are required to fill out this form and exchange it with the other party at least 1 week before your first judicial case conference. And this financial statement is a BC Supreme Court form. However, it can also be used for settlement negotiations even when no court proceedings have commenced. So you will find that even if you don't have a court file open with the BC Supreme Court, you may occasionally find yourself filling out this form anyways, because it is a very common tool that lawyers use and even self-represented litigants use as well to essentially provide a financial snapshot of your situation. And it can be very helpful for settlement negotiations, even if you don't have a court file open. So these are the reasons essentially why it's a very important document. The supporting materials that you're going to need to complete a financial statement are on this next slide that you see in front of you. So it would be a good idea to have these documents with you, in front of you, printed or on your screen as you are filling out a financial statement. Additionally, the documents that are listed here, many of them you will be required to attach to your financial statement in any event. So it would be a good idea to have them with you as you're filling it out. So going quickly through the list, your last 3 years income tax returns and notice assessments or reassessments, a most recent pay stub, a current BC property assessment if you own a real estate property, and those are the basic required documents that you have to attach to your financial statement. Also on this list, you're going to see some other documentation that is not necessarily required to be attached to your financial statement. I will go through the required documents in a minute, but these other documents listed here, such as the bank statements, copies of any life insurance policies, etc., they are still useful to help you fill out the financial statement, and you'll see why in a minute when we go to the actual financial statement form. Actually, we can do that right now. So I'm going to switch over now and I share my screen. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through the actual financial statement form and provide you with some comments and things to look out for as you're filling this form out. So first of all, this is the first page of the financial statement. This is what it looks like. And where it says claimant respondent, you would have the claimant's name and the respondent's name. It's just blank right now because this is a blank template. And I have highlighted the particular sections for you to look out for and information that needs to be filled in by you, such as your name, the date you're going to swear it. So scrolling down to the bottom of the first page of the financial statement, this section here, section 2, where you can choose to either check the box for I do not anticipate any significant changes in the information set out in this financial statement, or you can check the box for I anticipate the following significant changes to the information set out in this financial statement. This is actually a very important section that a lot of people just tend to gloss over and check the box for I don't anticipate any significant changes and then move on. But the reality is most people who are going through a divorce or separation probably are, as they're filling out this form, in a state of transition or change, right? By virtue of the fact that you're going through this separation. And so if your financial situation is going to be changing in the near future, it's really important to think about whether or not you actually do need to check the box here to say that you do anticipate significant changes to the information you're going to fill out in this form. And so I've provided some examples of this, such as, let's say you're currently still living in the family home with the other party, and the expenses you're going to list in this form reflect the current situation, which is what you should be doing. You should be this form should be filled out with your current financial information. But when the divorce is complete, you're not going to be living in the same home anymore. Your expenses will be different. So this is a potential significant change to the information you're going to be putting in this financial statement. Another example is you're currently living in temporary accommodations. For example, you've temporarily moved into your parents' home while you're sorting out your divorce or separation, but you're not planning on staying there forever. And once your situation is a bit more stable, you're planning on moving out and getting a place of your own. That's also a anticipated change that will affect your expenses, your rent potentially, if your parents aren't currently charging you rent, as an example, or charging you lower than market rate rent. A third example is, let's say your income in previous years was unusually high and you don't anticipate earning the same level of income going forward for whatever reason. And if that is the case, then it's also important to provide an explanation for why. For example, if there was a higher amount of overtime work available to you in the past, that is no longer available. So that also would qualify as a significant change. So these are some examples of why you would want to take a minute to think about whether you would have anticipated changes to any information that you put into this financial statement, and if so, then check the box, that relevant box, and explain why. And right below this would be the section where you're going to, when the financial statement is complete, this is the page where you're going to swear the financial statement with a lawyer or notary, much in the same way that you would swear an affidavit. The next page is income. So this first page, you're going to provide some basic information about the nature of your income. So you can see here under section A, employer information, you just need to check whichever box applies to you, whether you are an employee or whether you're self-employed, or if you own a business or if you're unemployed. Section B contains the documents that you are required to attach to this financial statement once you've filled it out. And a lot of this was in the list in the slide that was shown to you previously, the most common ones being, and you can see the form comes pre-checked with the first two boxes. You are required to provide your income tax returns and notice assessments for the past 3 years. And then the remaining items on the list, you check those boxes as they apply to you. So if you're an employee, as a third box says, then you have to provide your most recent pay stub, for example, and so on and so forth. The next section is for income. So this is the section where you're going to be listing your income. And generally for this section, it helps to have your most recent income tax return with you, because that will be of great help for you in filling out this section. So you can see here under line 1, you're going to have to put down your employment income. The form gives you the option to list the amount that you're paid either twice each month, every 2 weeks, or weekly. Really, the simplest thing to do here would be simply to just check the box for annually. And then on the right-hand column, you can see where it is in blue, you can just write out your annual income based on your most recent income tax return. So that's for employment income. And then if you receive other types of income, such as employment insurance benefits, workers' compensation benefits, pension income, income assistance, etc., then you fill out each of these lines accordingly. And again, all this information should be contained on your income tax return. And so it should be a relatively simple matter of just transcribing the information that's your income tax return and putting it right here on this page. Further down at the bottom of the page, you can see some additional information that the form requires. So if you are receiving child support or spousal support currently at this time from the other party, then you can include it here. Though the reality is most people who are filling out this form, there may not be any formal child support or spousal support being paid at this time. So it is unlikely that you will have to fill out this section, if you're not receiving any formal child support or spousal support. But if you are, then certainly you would want to fill out the amounts here accordingly. The next page is further information that you may be required to provide regarding your income. For example, if you're self-employed, then here's where you're going to have to put a bit more detail about your gross business income and then your net business income, for example, or if you receive rental income, you would list it here as well. Again, your income tax return will be of help to you and when you fill out this section, because it should have all the information that you need to carry over to this page here. The next section is for monthly expenses. All right, so this is where we get into, so we've now done the income section. The next section, the next piece of information that this form asks for you are your expenses. And so this is where things get a bit technical and where, get a bit detailed. And so you want to make sure that you fill out this section carefully. So the first part is compulsory deductions. So this is essentially the deductions that you will see on your pay. If you're an employee, there'll be the deductions that you see on your pay stub, such as CPP contributions, EI premiums, income taxes, employee pension contributions, etc. So for this first section, you just need to look at your most recent pay stub and plug in the numbers accordingly. Now, remember that these are monthly expenses that you're going to be listing here. So you want to pay attention to how often are you paid. So the one paycheck that you're looking at, is this a paycheck? Is this a pay? Are you paid every 2 weeks, for example, or are you paid twice a month? All right. So you want to pay attention to that because you need to put down the monthly amount here in this section. All right. So for example, if you're paid twice a month, then it's relatively simple. You look at your most recent pay stub, you look at the deductions, and you multiply that by 2, and then you'll get your monthly amount. If you're paid every
Oh,
two
they're
weeks,
doing
however,
financial disclosures. They're talking about financial disclosures.
There you go. Good one.
Oh, sorry, Felix, just remember to stay muted.
if there are any questions, I can answer them at the end of the presentation. So if you're paid every 2 weeks, however, so then the calculation is a bit different, right? Because being paid every 2 weeks is not the same frequency as being paid twice a month. In fact, being paid every 2 weeks is actually a greater frequency. I believe that's 26 pay periods in a year, as opposed to 24 pay periods in a year if you were paid twice a month. So you make sure to pay attention to that, because you're going to want to do the mathematical calculation accordingly to make sure that you get the monthly amount of deductions that you receive, and then put it in the right-hand column accordingly. The next section of expenses is housing. All right. Now I've put a comment here where to say that to give an example, if you're currently splitting some of these expenses with another person, it's helpful to include the amount you're paying in the right-hand column, and also include the total amount next to the description of the expense in the left-hand column. So I've provided an example here. Let's say you're still living in the same home with the other party, and the two of you have agreed. In the meantime, pending, the resolution of your divorce, you've agreed to split the rent or the mortgage 50-50. So it's helpful here to explain that situation. So in the description section, I put, for example, rent or mortgage split with the opposing party. The total amount is $3,000 per month, but my share is $1,500 per month. So on the right-hand column, I have put $1,500 because that's the amount that I personally am paying for right now, but the total rent is higher, and the other half is being paid by the other party. Of course, if you are solely paying for the rent or mortgage, then you will put that entire amount on the right-hand column. And the same applies for the rest of the housing expenses, property taxes. Again, property taxes are paid once or twice a year, so you're going to want to take that total amount of property tax that you've paid and divide it by 12 so that you can get the monthly amount that you would have paid for it. And same with property insurance, water, sewer, garbage, strata fees, house repairs and maintenance. For house repairs and maintenance, and this will be common for some of these expenses that we're going to go through. House repairs and maintenance, you can do your best estimate of how much you think you would spend on house repairs and maintenance over a year, and then divide it by 12 accordingly. The next section is utilities. Again, same as with the housing. If you're currently splitting those expenses with another person, it's helpful to clarify that and say what your personal share is, put that in the right-hand column, but then clarify in the description section on the left that the total amount is actually higher, is being split with somebody else. If, say the other party, if you're still living in the same, if you're still living under the same roof together, or say if you have a roommate. So the same principle applies here for utilities. And this is where you're going to list your heat, electricity, your telephone, your cell phone, cable TV, internet, etc. Next section is household expenses. Again, fairly self-explanatory. You're going to want to list how much you spend in food per month, meals outside the home, household supplies, etc. Again, your best estimate is just make your best estimate of how much you think you pay. You can look through your bank statements to give yourself an idea of how much you're spending, for example, at the grocery store every month, and then just average that out to get a general monthly average. The next sections, again, are pretty self-explanatory. Transportation, so anything to do with either public transit, or if you have a car, then any expenses related to your vehicle, gas and oil, insurance, parking, repairs, lease payments, etc. There's a section here for other, such as charitable donations, Vacation. Vacation is sometimes a little bit tricky for people to calculate. One way you can do it is just think about the last vacation you took and what was the total cost of that. And if it was the only vacation that you took that year, then you can take that total cost and then divide it by 12, and then you'll have your monthly amount. Next section is health. So if you have any extended health plans or premiums that you pay for either through work, or if you have a just a health plan that you purchased yourself, then you're going to want to list any expenses related to that plan here. If you have to pay for any drugs that are not covered by any or not reimbursed to you by any plan, then you're going to want to list the cost here. Same with dental care and health care. The next section is for personal expenses, so clothing, hair care, toiletries. Toiletry is a big one. People sometimes don't remember how much toiletries can actually add up. For example, razors can be quite expensive and add up. And so you might want to look through your bank statements to give yourself an idea of how much you're spending on each of these items per month on average. I've also made a note here on the section for gifts. When they say gifts, they're referring to gifts to people other than to your children, because there's a separate section you'll see in a second for gifts to children. So gifts to friends or other family members. The next section is children. So any childcare expenses, babysitters, daycare, etc. You're going to want to list here it's the monthly amount. Clothing for the kids, hair care, school fees and supplies, entertainment, recreation, activities and lessons. And then here you have as well gifts, as you can see here. So this is where you're going to want to list any gifts to your children specifically, and then gifts to other people you're going to want to list up above in your personal section. Next section is savings. So this is referring to if you make any monthly contributions to your RRSP, for example, or to an RESP if you have one for your children. All right. And if you don't make monthly contributions, but you make contribution every now and then when you have the money to spare to put towards these investments, then you can just average out that amount over a year and calculate the monthly average accordingly, and then put that in the right hand column. And of course, if you don't make any contributions to these investments or these types of accounts, then you can just leave this section blank. The next section is support payments to others. So this section is only if you are paying spousal child support to someone other than the opposing party or to the children at issue in your current court case. All right. So for example, if you have a child from a previous relationship and you are paying child support for that child, right, then this is where you're going to want to put in that information, the monthly amount you're paying for that the child from a previous relationship. This is not the section to be putting any information with regard to support that you're paying to your ex-spouse or to the children at issue in the current court case. The last section here is for debt payments. So similar to the monthly savings contribution, this section is only for if you are making payments, current payments towards an ongoing debt, such as a line of credit. If you have a line of credit debt or credit card debt, and you are making payments, regular payments to pay down that debt, then you're going to want to list it here as an expense. And again, if you're not making regular monthly payments to pay down that debt, but just payments every now and then, when you have the money available to do so, then just look at what you've been paying and calculate calculate the monthly average of that. So you can look at it over the past year. If it's been sporadic, it's only been a few payments, look at that total amount, take the total amount, divide it by 12, and then you're going to have your monthly average amount that you've been paying towards your debt. And you can see here the form asks you to, once you've filled all of this out, the form asks you to calculate your total monthly expenses, and then divide it, and then multiply that by 12 to get your total annual expenses. And you're going to want to list both of those numbers here at the bottom here on the right-hand side. So the next comment I have with regard to this, before we move on to the next section, is compare your total expenses against your total income that you've listed in the previous section. If your expenses are much higher than your income and you're not incurring a lot of debt, then you may have made some mistakes in listing out your expenses. All right. So if your income is $50,000 and after $50,000 a year, and after you fill out your expenses and you look at your total annual expenses here in this section here, and you realize once you calculate the total, it comes to $75,000 a year, but you don't have much debt, then you may have made a mistake you may have overestimated some of your expenses. Because otherwise, if your expenses are far exceeding your income, then it stands to reason you'd be incurring debt. Unless, of course, you're receiving financial assistance from family or friends or a third party, in which case it's important to make a note of that and explain that somewhere in this financial statement to explain why your expenses are so much higher than your income. And I've noted it down here as well. If you're temporarily receiving financial help from friends or family members, then you should mention this under the anticipated changes section that we talked about earlier in the first page of this financial statement. All right, moving on to the next section. The next section is property. So this is where you're going to list any of the assets and debts that you may have. Inserted a comment here. If you know the opposing party's assets and debts, it's helpful to list both yours and theirs and identify which ones are owned by yourself, which ones are owned by the opposing party or owned jointly. And the reason why I've inserted this comment is because this is meant to provide a financial snapshot of your current situation. And you can certainly list just everything that's in your name only. And especially if you are not sure what the other party has in their name. But it is helpful for whoever's looking at this financial statement later, whether it's a lawyer or whether it's a judge in court, it's helpful for them to see not just what you own, but what the other person owns as well in one document. And that can be very, that can make things go a bit faster, be more efficient, and honestly help you reach a settlement sometimes in a more efficient way. So I put an example here of what that could look like. So let's say there are 3 real estate properties. One is owned by you, one is owned by the other person, and the third one, the two of you own jointly. So this is how you would want to present that. You would list all 3 properties, each on a separate line with the address, and in brackets, right after each description, right after each address, you put down the name of who owns it, right? So John, Jane, and then if the third one's jointly owned, then you can just put joint or jointly owned. Same with any vehicles, and same with any financial assets here. When they say financial assets, they mean bank accounts. So savings or checkings accounts, GIC, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, insurance policies, etc. And so the form does tell you here to record the account number and name of institution where the accounts are held. You don't need to put the entire bank account number for security reasons. It's sufficient to list only the last 3 or 4 digits of each account number. But every account that is in your name should be listed here. And again, if you know what the other party has as well in their name, it is helpful also to list their accounts here too, along with the amount in each account on the right-hand column. The next section is for pensions or RRSPs. Again, similar to the bank account section above, you're going to want to list any pensions that you may have or RRSPs that you have, and the last 4 digits of the account, and then any amount in the right-hand column. Business interests. So if you own a business, or if the other party owns a business or a company, then then you should put that in this section here. And the last section is for other. So for example, if there's any expensive jewelry or artwork that anyone may have, then or any other asset of value that doesn't really fit the description of any of the sections above, then that's where you can put that here. And again, you're going to need to total up all of the estimated values of these assets and include it here at the bottom. The next section is for debts, and you're going to address this much in the same way as you did with assets. If you have any debts, you're going to want to list them here. For example, mortgage, line of credit, or credit card debts, or personal loans. These are the most common forms of debts. Secured debts, you can see it's split up between two sections, secured debts and unsecured debts. Secured debts are essentially debts that are registered against an asset of value that enables whoever loaned you the money to recover their money in case you don't pay them back. So the most common form of secured debt is a mortgage. Mortgage is secured against the house, and that's how banks ensure that they're going to eventually get their money back. So any secured debts that you may have, such as a mortgage, or if you have, for example, another common example of a secured debt is a line of credit that might be secured against your home as well, then you're going to want to list them in this first section here. The next section is for unsecured debts, so debts that are not secured against an asset of value, such as a personal loan from a friend or family member. You're going to want to list it here as well. And it's important this is an important section in that if you have any debts that you are looking to be recognized by the court, then you want to make sure that you've provided a comprehensive list. It is, if you leave off a debt in this section and because you forgot about it and you try to bring it up later, then it could be difficult to do that. So it's really important when you're filling out the section to really think about whether or not you have indeed listed all debts that you have in your name, either secured or unsecured. The next section here is excluded property. So essentially, and this is the comment here in yellow here, you're going to want to list any assets. Here, you're going to want to list any assets that you owned before the relationship and assuming it still exists in some form today, or any gifts or inheritances that you may have received at any time that still exists in some form today. So a most common example of this is if you say owned a real estate property just prior to the relationship, and the equity in that real estate property still exists in some form today. Either you still own that same piece of property, or it was sold during the relationship and the money was used to buy another piece of real estate, then it's still the original equity from the home that you owned prior to the relationship still exists in some form today. So you're going to want to list that here. Same with any gifts or inheritances. If the gift or inheritance has been spent, the money has been spent on to pay down debt or to purchase to buy food or purchase other items, then that money does not exist anymore. But if you put it into an investment account and that still exists, then you're going to want to list that here. This is your excluded property that becomes relevant later on when it comes to settlement, when it comes to property division. So again, important section. You want to make sure that if you owned anything before the relationship of value, or if you received any gifts or inheritances at any time, again, and all of which still exists in some form today, then it's important to put that here. The next section is disposal of property. So here's where the form's asking you to list any property disposed of in the 2 years preceding the statement. So for example, if a real estate property was sold in the last 2 years, then you're going to want to put the details here. You put the address, you put the date when it was sold, and the amount the net amount that you that was left over after payment of mortgage, etc. So same with if you closed a bank account that had money in it and the money was spent on something, then you're going to want to put the details here too for any disposal of property that happened in the past 2 years. The next section here is for special and extraordinary expenses. So special and extraordinary expenses apply if you have children. So of course, if there are no children at issue in your court case, then you will not need to fill out this section. But if there are children, then you do want to fill out this section. And you can see here that the form tells you the types of expenses that you should be listing here, such as childcare expenses, medical, dental costs that attributed to the child that are not the premiums, extraordinary expenses for school, post-secondary education expenses, or extracurricular expenses, for example. So you're going to want to list all of this here. And per child, you can see here name of child. So they've if you have 2 children, each with 2 different types of expenses, then you want to have the 2 different boxes and fill out each expense differently depending on which activities they're enrolled in, or whether perhaps their childcare costs are slightly different as well. So you're going to want to do it per child. I've also made a note here in yellow. Make sure to specify whether or not any of the expenses you're listing in this section here, make sure to specify if you're also listing them in your expense in part 2 monthly expenses up above. Because if you recall, you go up here, back to the monthly expenses, you'll see that there is a section here for children, including childcare, activities and lessons, school fees, supplies, etc. So if you are going to be listing, if you are going to be repeating some of these expenses, you want to specify that so that you don't double count. And so going back down, this was the special extraordinary expenses section, and again, you do it per child. So that's why there's a lot of the table is repeated over and over again, because depending on how many children you have, then you will want to fill out the number of boxes accordingly. And then you total it up here and then put the grand total at the bottom here on the bottom right. And then the last 2 parts of this of the financial statement, part 5, undue hardship, part 6, income of other persons in the household. These last 2 parts only need to be filled out if you are claiming undue hardship in order to reduce or cancel child support. The reality is the test for undue hardship is extremely strict. So generally speaking, it's unlikely that you will need to fill out parts 5 and 6. Most people don't have to fill out the section because, as I've said, the test for undue hardship is very, very high, and chances are it's not going to apply to your situation. So if you're not making a claim for undue hardship, then you do not need to fill out parts 5 and part 6, and you only need to fill out the parts that we've just gone through. So that's the financial statement form itself. Rachel, if we can just go back to the slides. So just to summarize the key points that we've gone through here for completing a financial statement or an F8. Number 1, make use of the anticipated changes section. If your situation is currently in a state of transition or in a state of flux, and you think that there could be changes in the future, then definitely make use of the anticipated changes section in the financial statement. Make sure there's no contradiction between your total income and total expenses. And if there is a contradiction or a discrepancy between the two, then make sure to include an explanation somewhere in your financial statement for why. And finally, it's helpful to list not just your own assets and debts when you're filling out the financial statement, but the other party's assets and debts as well, if you know what they are, of course. If you don't know what they are, then you don't need to fill it out. But if you do know what they are, then it's helpful to list both of them and identify who owns what.
Perfect. Thank you, Jennifer. So there's a couple notes here. We have some resources. You guys will get a copy of all of the materials as well. We have a guide that you can complete as well. You can read through the different points as well as rewatch this video. a Microsoft Word format of the Form F8 financial statement. It is a little difficult to find Word versions of forms right now. I know that that is currently being worked on, but the PDF one that you can download from the Supreme Court is a little tricky to manage. So we do recommend that you try to fill it out in Microsoft Word if you get available to that kind of document. The Legal Aid BC Family Law website does also have a step-by-step guide that you can read, and the BC Supreme Court also has some step-by-step guides that you can go through when you're filling it out. So these will be linked for you to be able to access. Now it is time for the question and answer. So you can feel free to submit any of the questions that you have, and we'll do our best to answer them. Actually, there's a couple already in here. Okay, so we have somebody that has a full-time job, and then they also tutor as a small-time part job. Do they need to tick the self-employment box? Would it be both of them at the same time, or just the one?
So if you currently have, that's a good question. So if you're currently an employee, but you also have a side job, which is your own little side business, then yes, the answer is you want to check both boxes. You can check the box for both I am an employee and I'm also self-employed. And when you fill out your income section, you're going to want to make sure to fill out the employment income section, but then also fill out the business income section as well to list your your side business income that you're also receiving.
Okay, next question. With regards to children expenses, if a child is a young adult, so 19 plus they have, but you're supporting them financially while they go to post-secondary, does that get added to the Form F8?
Yeah, so the Form F8 is meant to capture all of your current expenses that you're paying for. So if you are currently paying money for your adult child, then yes, you should be listing those expenses in the Form 8. In the financial statement, and just make sure to provide some details about what it is, right? So don't just put in a number without an explanation. You put a number and say this is for my adult child, and then provide the name, and it's for housing expenses, it's for their books, it's for their tuition or whatever the case may be. Just make sure to provide some details. But yes, because the financial statement is meant to provide a snapshot of your current expenses, and if you're currently helping to financially support your child, then you should absolutely include that information in the form. Yes.
Okay. The next one, in regards to undue hardship, what sorts of examples or list of things qualify? They're just curious what the significance of the section is.
Well, the significance of the section is that there are some times where somebody is carrying, say, an extremely high amount of debt for whatever reason, or perhaps they have they're disabled or have health issues, and that has significantly affected their income, their ability to work. These could potentially be grounds upon which to seek undue hardship. But again, the reality is the test is very, very strict, and statistically, it's unlikely that it would apply to your situation. But if somebody is seeking to reduce payment of child support, but yes, it's not. I can say that it's the court rarely allows the reduction of child support on the basis of undue hardship.
Okay. Is there any other questions that people want to submit? I'll give it a couple minutes here before we wrap up early for the night.
Oh, I think I saw. Yes, yeah, and I saw, Rachel, you answered it, but there is I'm just going to expand a bit on this. Someone was asking if the Form 8 must also be complete for provincial court, and yes, Rachel did answer that. Provincial court uses a different form. It's called the Form for financial statement. And yes, the form that we just went through is only for Supreme Court, but I just want to add to that the provincial court form looks very similar to this one. The format is pretty similar, and you have to provide this similar types of information. So you have to list your income, assets, debts, and expenses. The key difference there is, unless they've changed it recently, Rachel, which I don't think they have, but the provincial court just asks you to list your expenses annually instead of monthly, which I personally find not very helpful, and that monthly expenses are generally more informative than annual expenses. But yes, there is a provincial court form. It's different, slightly different, but it looks pretty similar.
Okay, perfect. It doesn't look like there's any other questions. So if anybody has anything they didn't get to ask today, just send an email to us. You guys know our email by now. But if there's anything else, just, submit it now. Otherwise, we'll wrap up. But thank you very much,
Yeah.
Jennifer.
Yep. The last thing I want to say is that, like I said at the beginning of this session, the financial statement is a really important form. It's not to be done with half your attention on it, or done lightly. Amici Curie does provide help with filling out legal forms, including the financial statement. So so if you have any questions, uncertainty about how to fill out yours, then by all means reach out to Amici Curie to schedule an appointment for help with filling out the financial statement, because as I've said, it's an extremely important form. The courts will be looking at it and relying on it to help resolve your family law case. So you want to make sure that the information in the financial statement is as accurate and as organized as possible to achieve your goals.
One more question actually just popped in. So the person has already done a Form F8, but they filed a new application with the Supreme Court. Will they need to fill out a new Form 8?
So the answer to that generally depends on how old the F8, the last F8 that you filed with the court is. If it's only, a month old or 2 months old, and your situation is not that different, has not changed since the last time you swore in a financial statement, then maybe you don't need to do another one. But if the last financial statement that you filed with the court is, say, a year old, a year and a half old, 2 years old, then yes, you are most likely looking at having to do a new one, because it will help the court to have the most updated information.
I think it also depends on the type of application you're going for, right, Jennifer? I think if
Yes.
there's financial situation,
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's a great point. So so like Rachel says, it also depends on the type of application that is currently at issue, right? If the application has to do with solely to do with parenting, for example, and doesn't have anything to do with finances, then no, maybe it's not necessary to do another financial statement. But if the application is directly related to finances, for example, if the application is for child support or spousal support, or something to do with the real estate property, then yeah, you're probably looking at having to do another financial statement, especially if the previous one is quite old.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And
I think, they said that makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I see there's a comment about it's from 2020, but financial situation is the same. Yeah, I get it, but at the same time, 2020 was 3 years ago, and the court probably would have questions about whether or not, anything's changed in the past 3 years, so it might be a good idea to do another one. Yeah.
Okay, great. I think that's everything for tonight. Again, thank you very much, Jennifer, for doing the presentation, and we'll give you guys the slides and the materials in the next couple of days here, so you can rewatch anything if need be. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Dylan, you sell out.